The first thing the bank officer said was, "Miss Bennett, before we discuss the $2 million loan, I need to ask you one question." I was standing in the middle of a grocery store in Cleveland holding a basket with eggs, coffee, and a birthday cake for my daughter. I almost laughed. "I think you have the wrong person," I said. The woman on the phone paused, then she said, "Your name is Emily Bennett, correct?" "Yes." "Your social security number ends in 4821. My hand tightened around the shopping basket. "Yes, and you recently signed loan documents for a commercial property in Arizona." The grocery store suddenly seemed very quiet. I looked at the cake in my basket. A pink frosting message covered the top, "Happy 18th birthday, Lily." Then I looked at my reflection in the freezer door. "No," I said slowly, "I did not." The woman took a breath. "Miss Bennett, then we may have a serious problem." She was right, but what I didn't know yet was that the person who had stolen my identity wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a hacker in another country. It wasn't some criminal who had found my information online. It was my own sister, and by the time I discovered what she had done, she had already used my name to borrow $2 million. My name is Emily Bennett. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my life, I believed my sister Claire was the person who knew me better than anyone. We were born 11 months apart. Growing up, people often thought we were twins. We had the same brown hair, the same green eyes, and the same sharp cheekbones. That came from our mother, but that was where the similarities ended. Claire was loud, confident, charming. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 5 new friends. I was quieter, more careful, I thought, before I spoke. And while Claire always seemed to be chasing the next big opportunity, I spent 15 years building a small but successful accounting firm outside Cleveland. Nothing glamorous. No private jets, no luxury cars. Just spreadsheets, tax returns, payroll systems, and hundreds of small business owners who trusted me with their money. I had worked for every dollar I owned. My house was paid off. I had money in retirement accounts, and I had never missed a payment in my life. Claire knew all of that. She knew exactly how careful I was. She also knew that I had always been the sister who helped when she needed money for her first business. I loaned it to her when she fell behind on her rent. I paid 3 months when she divorced her second husband. I let her stay in my guest room for 6 months, and when she told me she had finally found a business opportunity that would change her life, I believed her. It was a luxury wellness resort in Scottsdale, Arizona. At least that's what she told me. She said the property was undervalued. She said the previous owner was desperate to sell. She said the resort already had a loyal customer base, beautiful grounds, and enough room for expansion. "We can turn it into something incredible," she told me over dinner. I remember the way she said the word "we." I looked up from my menu. "We?" Claire smiled. "Not financially. I know you don't want to invest, but you could help me with the numbers." That was Claire. She always knew exactly how to make a request sound harmless, so I agreed to review her business plan. She sent me financial projections, revenue estimates, expense reports, and property information. I spent an entire weekend going through everything, and I found problems immediately. The projected revenue was wildly optimistic, the expenses were understated, and the property needed millions in repairs. I called her. "Claire, I don't think this is a good investment." She became quiet, then she said, "You always do. This stew would find reasons why everyone else should stay small." That sentence hurt more than it should have. I reminded her that I wasn't trying to stop her, I was trying to protect her. She laughed. "You've always been afraid of risk." Emily, maybe I was, but I also knew the difference between risk and stupidity. I told her not to buy the property. She told me she was going to do it anyway, and after that conversation, something changed. Claire stopped asking me for advice. She stopped sending me updates. She stopped calling. For almost 6 months we barely spoke. I assumed she was angry. I didn't know she was preparing to use me. The first warning came 3 weeks before the bank called. I received a letter from a credit monitoring company. There was an inquiry on my credit report from a financial institution in Arizona. I ignored it. I assumed it was a mistake. Then another inquiry appeared, then another. I called the company. They told me the inquiries were connected to a commercial loan application. I said I had never applied for a commercial loan. They told me to contact the bank. I did. The bank asked me to verify my identity. I answered every question: my date of birth, my address, my previous address. The last 4 digits of my social security number. Then the representative said something that made my stomach drop. Ma'am, according to our records, you personally visited one of our branches in Scottsdale. I had never been to Scottsdale, not once. I asked for a copy of the application. They refused. They said there was an active investigation. I called Claire, she didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. Then I received a text, busy. What do you want? I wrote, the bank says someone used my identity to apply for a business loan in Arizona. Do you know anything about this? The message was read immediately. Then nothing. 5 minutes past 10:20. Finally, she replied, why would I know anything about that? I stared at the screen. Because you were the only person who knew everything. My address, my social security number, my financial history, my signature, and suddenly I remembered something I had dismissed months earlier. Claire had asked me for a copy of my driver's license. She said she needed it to update an insurance policy connected to a family property. I had sent it. She had also asked me for a document with my social security number. I had sent that too, because she was my sister, because I trusted her. I called her again. This time she answered, Emily, I'm busy. Did you use my identity? There was silence. Then she said, what are you talking about? The Arizona bank. Her voice changed just slightly, but I heard it. You're being dramatic. Did you use my name to apply for a loan? Of course not. Then why does the bank have my information? I don't know, Claire. What I'm asking you one more time. She became angry, and that was when I knew. People who are innocent usually say, I have no idea what you're talking about. People who are guilty say, why are you accusing me? Claire said. The second one, she told me I was paranoid. She told me I had always thought the worst of her. Then she hung up. The next morning, the bank called me again. This time they asked me to come to a branch in person. I drove there with my husband Mark. The loan officer was waiting for us in a private office. She placed a thick folder on the table. Before we continue, she said, I need to make something clear. I nodded. We believe your identity may have been used fraudulently. By whom we don't know yet. She opened the folder. Inside were copies of loan documents. My name appeared on every page. My social security number, my date of birth, my address, my financial information, and at the bottom of several pages was a signature that looked almost exactly like mine. Almost, but not quite. I stared at it. Then I saw the name of the business, Bennett Dessert Wellness LLC. I had never heard of it. The bank officer continued, the loan amount is $2.1 million. My husband looked at me. I couldn't speak. The money had been used to purchase the Scottsdale property. Claire had told me about the property she had supposedly purchased with investors. The property, she had said, had nothing to do with me. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. Who is listed as the primary borrower? The officer looked at the file. Claire Bennett, my sister. And beside her name was mine, listed as a personal guarantor. My entire financial life was attached to a $2 million loan I had never seen. I asked how the bank had approved it. The officer said the application had included financial statements showing that I owned significant assets, my paid-off house, my retirement accounts, my business, everything. Claire hadn't just stolen my identity. She had used my entire life as collateral. And then the bank showed me the final page, a notarized document. It stated that I had personally appeared before a notary in Arizona. I had not. I had been in Ohio. Working in my office, there was only one person who could have known enough about me to create all of this, and now I had proof. I called Claire from the parking lot. She answered on the third ring. Emily, where are you? Arizona. Of course she was. I took a breath. You used my identity to get a $2.1 million loan. The silence that followed was longer than before. Then Claire said, you don't understand. No, I understand perfectly. It was supposed to be temporary. Temporary. I was going to refinance. You forged my signature. I didn't forge anything. You used my social security number. You gave me those documents. The words hit me harder than anything else. I said nothing. Claire continued, you gave me your information. You trusted me. You can't suddenly act like I hacked into your life. I finally understood. She believed that because I had once trusted her. She had permission to use everything I had. I asked her one question. Did you ever plan to tell me? She didn't answer, and that answer was enough. I hung up. Then I called the police. The next 48 hours were a nightmare. I froze every credit account, changed every password, contacted every bank, called my attorney, filed an identity theft report, And then the bank told me something that made my blood run cold. The first loan payment was due in 12 days. If Claire didn't pay, the bank could pursue me. My house, my business, my savings, everything I had built could be dragged into a debt I had never agreed to. I called Claire one last time. She was furious. You're going to destroy me. No, Claire. You're my sister. You used my identity. I was going to pay it back with what silence exactly? The business wasn't making enough money. The resort was losing money. The financial projections had been fake. She had bought a failing property using my identity as protection, and now the entire thing was collapsing. 3 days later, I received a call from the bank. Ms. Bennett, we have an update. I sat at my desk. What kind of update? The loan has been placed under review. I exhaled. Then the officer said, your sister has submitted a statement claiming you were aware of the loan. I felt something inside me go completely still. She was trying to make me look like a co-conspirator. She was trying to turn her crime into a family misunderstanding. Was when I stopped trying to save Claire. I hired a forensic investigator. We went through every document, every email, every text message, every login, and then we found the mistake Claire had made. She had been careful with my identity, but she had not been careful with her own. The loan application had been submitted from an email account registered to her. The documents had been uploaded from her laptop, and the fake notarization had been arranged through a company she had used before. But the biggest mistake was hidden in the financial statements. Claire had altered my real documents. She had changed the numbers. She had taken my actual bank statements and modified them to make my assets appear larger. But she had forgotten one thing. My accounting firm had digital copies of the original documents with times. The originals showed exactly what I owned. The altered documents showed something else. The investigator found the difference in less than an hour, and suddenly story collapsed. The bank had evidence, the police had evidence, and I had something even more important, proof that I had never agreed to the loan. A week later, Claire came to my house. I was sitting in the living room when she walked through the door. She looked exhausted. No makeup, no expensive clothes, no confidence. Just fear. Emily, she said. I didn't stand up. What do you want? She sat across from me. The bank is taking the property. I said nothing. They're going to sue me. Still nothing. And if they do, I'll lose everything. I looked at her. You already used everything. Her eyes filled with tears. I was desperate. You should have asked me. You would have said no. Yes. She looked away, and there it was, the entire truth. She knew I would say no, so she created a version of me who had said yes. I told her the bank had evidence that she had committed identity theft. She began crying. Please don't press charges. I looked at my sister, the same woman I had once rescued from unpaid rent, the same woman I had once allowed to sleep in my guest room, the same woman who had taken my identity and put my entire life at risk. You didn't ask me for help. I said you stole it. She said I was her sister. I told her that was exactly why it hurt, because strangers don't get access to your life. Family does. The next morning, I gave the police everything, every document, every message, every piece of evidence. I didn't lie for her. I didn't protect her, and I didn't withdraw my complaint. The bank removed me from the loan. The property was seized. Claire was charged with identity theft, forgery, and fraud. She eventually accepted a plea agreement. She lost the resort, her business, her reputation, and for a long time she blamed me. She told everyone I had destroyed her life, but I hadn't. I had simply stopped allowing her to destroy mine. Months later, I received one final letter from her. It said, I hope one day you understand why I did it. I read that sentence 3 times, then I put the letter in a drawer because I did understand. She wanted a life she couldn't afford. She wanted success without waiting. She wanted to use my credit, my assets, my identity, and my trust to build something that belonged to her. And when I said no, she decided to make me say yes. That's the part people misunderstand about betrayal. The worst betrayal isn't always what someone takes from you. Sometimes it's realizing that they knew exactly how much you trusted them and used that trust as the key. The bank called me because they thought I had borrowed $2 million. But the real call I needed was the one that finally woke me up. My sister didn't steal my identity in one night. She started stealing pieces of my trust years before. And by the time she used my name to borrow $2.1 million, I had already given her the one thing she needed most. I believed she would Never betray me, that was my mistake, and it was the last one I ever made. She was trying to make me look like a co-conspirator. She was trying to turn her crime into a family misunderstanding. That was when I stopped trying to save Claire. I hired a forensic investigator. We went through every document, every email, every text message, every login, and then we found the mistake Claire had made. She had been careful with my identity, but she had not been careful with her own. The loan application had been submitted from an email account registered to her. The documents had been uploaded from her laptop, and the fake notarization had been arranged through a company she had used before. But the biggest mistake was hidden in the financial statements. Claire had altered my real documents. She had changed the numbers. She had taken my actual bank statements and modified them to make my assets appear larger. But she had forgotten one thing. My accounting firm had digital copies of the original documents, with times. The originals showed exactly what I owned. The altered documents showed something else. The investigator found the difference in less than an hour. And suddenly Claire's story collapsed. The bank had evidence, the police had evidence, and I had something even more important. Proof that I had never agreed to the loan. A week later, Claire came to my house. I was sitting in the living room when she walked through the door. She looked exhausted. No makeup, no expensive clothes, no confidence, just fear. "Emily," she said. I didn't stand up. "What do you want?" She sat across from me. "The bank is taking the property." I said nothing. "They're going to sue me." Still nothing. "And if they do, I'll lose everything." I looked at her. "You already used everything." Her eyes filled with tears. I was desperate. "You should have asked me. You would have said no." "Yes." She looked away, and there it was. The entire truth. She knew I would say no. So she created a version of me who had said yes. I told her the bank had evidence that she had committed identity theft. She began crying. "Please don't press charges." I looked at my sister. The same woman I had once rescued from unpaid rent. The same woman I had once allowed to sleep in my guest room. The same woman who had taken my identity and put my entire life at risk. "You didn't ask me for help," I said. "You stole it." She said I was her sister. I told her that was exactly why it hurt, because strangers don't get access to your life. Family does. The next morning I gave the police everything. Every document, every message, every piece of evidence. I didn't lie for her. I didn't protect her, and I didn't withdraw my complaint. The bank removed me from the loan. The property was seized. Claire was charged with identity theft, forgery, and fraud. She eventually accepted a plea agreement. She lost the resort, her business, her reputation, and for a long time she blamed me. She told everyone I had destroyed her life. But I hadn't. I had simply stopped allowing her to destroy mine. Months later, I received one final letter from her. It said, "I hope one day you understand why I did it." I read that sentence 3 times. Then I put the letter in a drawer, because I did understand. She wanted a life she couldn't afford. She wanted success without waiting. She wanted to use my credit, my assets, my identity, and my trust to build something that belonged to her. And when I said no, she decided to make me say yes. That's the part people misunderstand about betrayal. The worst betrayal isn't always what someone takes from you. Sometimes it's realizing that they knew exactly how much you trusted them, and used that trust as the key. The bank called me because they thought I had borrowed $2 million. But the real call I needed was the one that finally woke me up. My sister didn't steal my identity in one night. She started stealing pieces of my trust years before, and by the time she used my name to borrow $2.1 million, I had already given her the one thing she needed most. I believed she would never betray me. That was my mistake. And it was the last one I ever made. There was one more thing I had to do. I had to prove that the person who had signed those documents was not me, because even with the bank's evidence, even with the altered financial statements, there was still a dangerous question hanging over everything. Why had I given Claire access to my personal information in the first place? The answer was simple: because I trusted my sister, and that trust had become the most expensive mistake of my life. I spent the next several weeks meeting with investigators, attorneys, and bank representatives, every meeting forced, me to relive the same details. When had Claire received my driver's license? When had I sent her my social security document? What passwords had I shared? What conversations had we had about the Arizona property? At first, I felt embarrassed, then angry, then embarrassed again, because every time I answered a question, I realized how many opportunities I had given her. I had sent her copies of documents I had trusted her with personal information. I had reviewed her business plan. I had even told her exactly how much money I had saved for retirement. Not because I was careless, because she was my sister, but the investigators kept finding more. Claire had created a second email address that looked almost identical to mine. She had used my name in messages with the bank. She had even created a fake signature block with my business information. The more we uncovered, the clearer the plan became. Claire hadn't suddenly lost control. She had planned this. She had studied my life. She had studied my finances. She had studied what I owned, and then she had figured out how to turn all of it into collateral. One afternoon, my attorney placed a file in front of me. "There's something you need to see." I opened it. Inside was a copy of an email Claire had sent to the bank. The subject line said "Additional guarantor information." I read the message, then I read it again. Claire had written that I was her sister, that I had agreed to support the business, that I was fully aware of the loan, and that I had personally reviewed and approved the financial projections. Every word was a lie, but there was one sentence that made my hands go cold. Claire had written, "Emily has always supported my business decisions." I stared at those words because technically she was right. I had supported her, I had helped her, I had encouraged her, but she had twisted that support into consent, and suddenly I understood something terrifying. Claire didn't believe she had betrayed me. She believed I had betrayed her by refusing to help. That was why she felt entitled to use my identity in her mind. She wasn't stealing. She was taking what she believed I owed her. My attorney looked at me. "You understand that this email is important evidence?" I nodded, but I was barely listening. I was thinking about the first time Claire had asked me for money. She had been 24 years old. She had just moved into a new apartment and couldn't pay the security deposit. I had given her the money. She promised to pay me back. She never did. I let it go then. She needed money for a car repair, then rent, then her first business. Every time there was a reason. Every time I told myself family helped family, but somewhere along the way, Claire had stopped seeing my help as a gift. She had started seeing it as an obligation, and now she believed my entire identity belonged to her. The investigation continued. Then the bank found something unexpected. The notary who had supposedly witnessed my signature in Arizona had never actually met me. The signature had been submitted electronically. The notary had verified Claire's identity, not mine. Claire had somehow made it appear that I had been present, but she had made one critical mistake. The security footage from the notary's office showed Claire entering alone. She had walked into the office carrying a folder. She had walked out 22 minutes later. I was in Cleveland that entire day. My office security system proved it. My computer had logged me into my accounting software. My employees had seen me, and my car had never left Ohio. The evidence was overwhelming, but Claire still refused to admit what she had done. Then one morning I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello." There was silence. Then a man's voice said, "Ms. Bennett." "Yes. This is Daniel Ruiz. I'm the property manager for the Scottsdale resort." My stomach tightened. "What do you want?" "I thought you should know that your sister is trying to sell the property." I sat up straight. "She can't sell the property." "She says she can." "Does she have a buyer?" "Yes." I felt the room spin slightly. The resort was already under investigation. The loan was under review, and Claire was trying to sell the property before the bank could seize it. "Who is the buyer?" "I don't know, but she told us the sale would close within 2 weeks." I thanked him and ended the call. Then I immediately contacted my attorney. He was quiet when I told him, "Emily, if she sells the property, this becomes much more complicated." "Can she do that?" "She may try, then stop her. We'll file for an emergency injunction." That afternoon we went to court. I had never been inside a courtroom for anything more serious than jury duty. Now I was sitting beside my attorney while he explained how my sister had used my identity to secure a multi-million-dollar loan and was now attempting to sell the property connected to the fraud. The judge reviewed the documents. The bank had called me. I felt like I could breathe, but Claire wasn't finished that night. She called Me, I almost didn't answer, but I did. What do you want? You went to court, yes. You had no right, I almost laughed. No right, you're trying to ruin my business. You stole my identity. I told you I was going to pay the loan. You used my name without permission. You knew I was buying the resort. I knew you were considering it. You knew I needed financing. I knew you needed financing for yourself. There was a pause then. She said something I will never forget. You should be grateful. I stared at the phone. For what? For giving me the opportunity. I couldn't speak. Claire continued, if I succeed, you benefit too. I finally understood how completely she had rewritten reality in her own mind. She believed that because I was her sister, her success belonged to both of us, but her debt belonged to me too. Her risk belonged to me, her decisions belonged to me, and apparently my identity belonged to her. You didn't give me an opportunity. I said you put my entire life at risk. You're being dramatic. That word again, dramatic. The same word she had used when I first questioned the loan, the same word she used whenever I refused to pretend everything was fine. I told her the court had stopped the sale. She became silent. Then she said, you really are going to let them take everything from me? No, you are. No, Claire. I took a breath. You did that? She hung up. The next morning, the bank froze the resort's operating accounts. The employees couldn't receive their paychecks. The vendors stopped deliveries. The property manager began receiving angry calls, and Claire finally realized what happens when a business is built on borrowed money and false documents. It doesn't collapse slowly, it collapses all at once. She called me 12 times that day. I didn't answer. Then she left a voicemail. Her voice was shaking. Emily, please call me. I need you to tell the bank this was a misunderstanding. I deleted the voicemail not because I didn't care, because I finally understood that every time I answered, she tried to make her emergency my responsibility. But this was no longer a family argument. It was a criminal investigation, and I was the victim. 3 days later, the police contacted me. They wanted to interview Claire. She had been ordered to appear. I was asked whether I wanted to be present. I said no. I didn't want to watch my sister be questioned. I didn't want to see her cry. I didn't want to hear her explain why she had done it, because I already knew. She wanted what I had, and she believed being my sister gave her the right to take it. The interview lasted almost 4 hours. Afterward, the detective called me Miss Bennett. She denied everything at first. I closed my eyes. Of course she did, but eventually she admitted using your documents. I sat completely still. What exactly did she admit? She said she believed you would have agreed to the loan if she had asked. I let out a bitter laugh. She knew I wouldn't. The detective paused. Yes. That was the part that hurt most. She knew I would say no. She knew the numbers didn't work. She knew the property was a terrible investment. She knew I would never risk my house and business on a failing resort. And that's why she had used my identity instead, not because she didn't know me, because she knew me perfectly. She knew exactly what I would refuse, and she found a way to pretend I had agreed. A few weeks later, the bank officially removed my name from the loan. The investigation proved that my signature had been forged, and my identity had been used without authorization. My accounts were protected. My house was safe. My business was safe. But Claire's situation became worse. The resort was seized. The employees were laid off. The property was eventually sold. To recover part of the bank's losses, Claire was left with nothing, and for the first time in her life, there was no one left to rescue her. Not me, not our parents, not some new boyfriend, no one. She had to face the consequences herself, and that's when she came to my house. I was sitting in the living room. When she walked through the door, she looked exhausted. No makeup, no expensive clothes, no confidence. Just fear. Emily, she said. I didn't stand up. What do you want? She sat across from me. The bank is taking the property. I said nothing. They're going to sue me. Still nothing. And if they do, I'll lose everything. I looked at her. You already used everything. Her eyes filled with tears. I was desperate. You should have asked me. You would have said no, yes. She looked away, and there it was, the entire truth. She knew I would say no, so she created a version of me who had said yes. I told her the bank had evidence that she had committed identity theft. She began crying. Please don't press charges. I looked at my sister. The same woman I had once rescued from unpaid rent. The same woman I had once allowed to sleep in my guest room. The same woman who had taken my identity and put my entire life at risk. You didn't ask me for help. I said you stole it. She said I was her sister. I told her that was exactly why it hurt, because strangers don't get access to your life, family does, and that was the moment I realized something I had spent years believing. That protecting family meant standing beside them no matter what they did, but sometimes, standing beside someone while they destroy your life isn't loyalty, it's surrender. And I was done surrendering the next morning. I gave the police everything, every document, every message, every piece of evidence. I didn't lie for her, I didn't protect her, and I didn't withdraw my complaint for the first time in my life. I chose myself, and I never once regretted it. The bank removed me from the loan. The property was seized. Claire was charged with identity theft, forgery, and fraud. She eventually accepted a plea agreement. She lost the resort, her business, her reputation. And for a long time she blamed me. She told everyone I had destroyed her life, but I hadn't. I had simply stopped allowing her to destroy mine. Months later I received one final letter from her. It said, "I hope one day you understand why I did it." I read that sentence 3 times, then I put the letter in a drawer, because I did understand she wanted a life she couldn't afford. She wanted success without waiting. She wanted to use my credit, my assets, my identity, and my trust to build something that belonged to her. And when I said no, she decided to make me say yes. That's the part people misunderstand about betrayal. The worst betrayal isn't always what someone takes from you. Sometimes it's realizing that they knew exactly how much you trusted them, and used that trust as the key. The bank called me because they thought I had borrowed $2 million, but the real call I needed was the one that finally woke me up. My sister didn't steal my identity in one night. She started stealing pieces of my trust years before, and by the time she used my name to borrow $2.1 million, I had already given her the one thing she needed most. I believed she would never betray me. That was my mistake, and it was the last one I ever made. But there was one more thing I had to do. I had to rebuild my life. Not financially. Financially I was safe. The bank had removed my name from the loan. My house was protected. My business was still operating, but identity theft leaves behind something people don't talk about: doubt. For months, every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. Every letter in the mailbox made me nervous. Every email from a financial institution made me wonder what Claire had done next. I changed everything: my passwords, my accounts, my security questions, my business procedures. I stopped sending personal documents through regular email. I stopped assuming that family members deserved automatic access to my information. And most importantly, I stopped confusing trust with permission. My parents struggled with that. They called me after Claire's arrest. My mother cried, "She's still your sister." I sat quietly on the phone. I know she made a terrible mistake. She committed identity theft. She was desperate. So was I. My mother became silent. I continued, "Mom, I was desperate too. I was desperate to understand how my own sister could do this to me." She started crying again. My father came on the phone. He said Claire had lost everything. I told him I knew. He said she needed family. I said she needed to face what she had done. That conversation ended badly. For months, my parents acted like I was the cruel one. They said I should have helped Claire. They said I should have withdrawn my complaint. They said families should forgive. But nobody asked me why Claire had been allowed to use my name in the first place. Nobody asked who would have paid the $2 million loan if I hadn't discovered it. Nobody asked what would have happened to my daughter if I had lost my house. They only asked why I wasn't willing to sacrifice everything to save Claire, and eventually I stopped answering those questions because I had already answered them. I had spent years helping my sister. She had spent years learning that my kindness had no consequences until the day it did. A year after the bank called me, I received a notification that Claire had been released. She had completed the first part of her sentence and was required to find employment. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt tired. There is a difference between justice and revenge. Revenge is wanting someone to suffer because they hurt you. Justice is refusing to allow them to hurt you again. I didn't want Claire homeless. I didn't want her dead. I didn't want her to suffer forever. I simply didn't want to be the person responsible for fixing the life she had destroyed. And there was a difference. Claire eventually found a job. She rented a small apartment. She started over without my credit, without my money, without my identity, and for the first time she had to build a life using her own name. I heard about it through my mother. I never asked for details. I didn't want to know where Claire lived. I didn't want to know how much she earned. I didn't Want to know whether she was happy because I had finally learned that not knowing everything about someone is sometimes the healthiest form of distance. My relationship with my parents changed too. They still loved Claire. I understood that, but I couldn't pretend what she had done was just a family disagreement. It wasn't. She had taken my personal information, forged my signature, created fake documents, used my assets as collateral, and then tried to convince the bank that I had agreed. That wasn't a misunderstanding, that was a decision, and she made it over and over again. For months, I kept the final letter she sent me in a drawer. I don't know why, maybe because part of me was still waiting for an apology, not an explanation, not an excuse. An apology, there is a difference. I was desperate, as an explanation you should have helped me, as an excuse, I am sorry I betrayed you. As an apology, Claire never said those words, not once, and eventually I stopped waiting for them. I took the letter out of the drawer, I read it one last time, then I tore it in half, then in half again, and I threw it away, not because I hated her, because I didn't want to carry her choices anymore. My daughter Lily was 18 when all of this happened. For a long time I tried to hide the worst parts from her. I didn't want her to see me as someone who had been fooled. But one night she asked me directly, "Mom, why did Aunt Claire do that?" I didn't know how to answer, so I told her the truth, because she wanted something she couldn't afford, and she believed she was entitled to use someone else's life to get it. Lily thought about that then, she asked. Even family? I looked at her, especially family. She didn't understand at first. Then I explained something I wish someone had explained to me when I was younger. Being related to someone doesn't mean they are entitled to your money. It doesn't mean they are entitled to your passwords. It doesn't mean they are entitled to your credit. It doesn't mean they are entitled to your identity, and it certainly doesn't mean you have to destroy yourself to prove that you love them. Love without boundaries doesn't always look like love. Sometimes it looks like permission. And I had given Claire permission for far too long. The strangest part is that before all of this happened, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I thought betrayal was someone lying to you or cheating on you or leaving you. But identity theft is different. Someone doesn't just take something from you, they try to become you. They use your name, your history, your credit, your reputation. They walk into rooms as you. They sign documents as you. They make promises as you. And then you are left trying to prove that you are actually yourself. For months I had to prove that I had not borrowed money I never requested. I had to prove that I had not signed documents I had never seen. I had to prove that I had not agreed to something my own sister had done. And that changed the way I looked at trust forever. I still help people. I still believe in family. I still believe that people deserve second chances. But now I understand something I didn't before. A second chance is not the same as unlimited access. You can forgive someone and still never give them your password. You can love someone and still refuse to co-sign their loan. You can care about someone and still let them face the consequences of their own choices. Those things can all be true. At the same time, Claire wanted me to believe that refusing to save her meant I didn't love her, but the truth was the opposite. I had loved her enough for years. I had given her money, a place to stay, advice, support, opportunities. What I had never given her was permission to steal my identity, and she took it anyway, so I learned to stop apologizing for protecting myself. Today my business is stronger than ever. I created new security systems for every client. I teach small business owners how to protect their financial information. And sometimes during those presentations, I tell them my story, not all of it. I don't say my sister's name. I don't talk about the criminal case. I simply tell them this: the person most likely to have access to your identity is often the person you trust the most, and the person you trust the most may be the last person you ever suspect. I used to think that was a depressing lesson. Now I see it differently. The lesson isn't to trust nobody. The lesson is to trust people without abandoning yourself, because the truth is, I wasn't wrong for loving my sister. I wasn't wrong for helping her. I wasn't wrong for believing she could do better. I was wrong only when I ignored the moment my help stopped being appreciated and started being expected, and when expectation turned into entitlement, and entitlement turned into theft. The bank called me because someone had used my name to borrow $2 million. But that phone call did something else. It forced me to look at my entire relationship with my sister, and I realized that the $2.1 million loan was not the first thing Claire had taken from me. She had taken small things first: my time, my money, my trust, my peace, my ability to say no without feeling guilty. The loan was simply the first time she took something big enough that I couldn't pretend it was normal anymore. That was the real betrayal, not the signature, not the forged documents, not even the money. It was realizing that I had spent years teaching someone that my boundaries did not matter, and then being shocked when they crossed the biggest one. I don't know what will happen to Claire in the future. Maybe she will change, maybe she'll won't. That's no longer my responsibility. I hope she builds a good life. I hope she learns from what happened, but I will never again be the person who stands between her and the consequences of her own choices, because I finally understand something. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is stop saving them, and sometimes the most important person you have to protect is yourself. My sister stole my identity to get a $2 million loan. The bank called me before she did, and that phone call changed everything. Not because it cost me $2 million. It didn't, because I fought hard enough to protect my name. It changed everything because it showed me who my sister really was. And once you see someone clearly, you can forgive them, you can wish them well, you can even love them from a distance, but you can never unknow what you know, and I will never again confuse being someone's sister with being responsible for their life. The next morning I woke up before sunrise. For a few seconds I forgot what had happened. Then I saw the stack of documents on my desk. The bank investigation, the police reports, the copies of my forged signature, and the letter from Claire. I sat there in the darkness, staring at the papers. For years, I had believed that if something terrible happened to me, my family would be the people standing beside me. But when the worst thing in my life happened, my family had divided into two groups: the people who wanted the truth and the people who wanted the truth to be less inconvenient. My mother called again that morning. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hello. She didn't say hello. She said, "Claire is asking for you." I closed my eyes. Why? She wants to talk about what she says she wants to explain. I almost laughed. Mom, she already explained. She was desperate. She used my identity. She made a mistake. I looked at the documents on my desk. A mistake was forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake was sending an email to the wrong person. A mistake was using someone's identity to borrow over $2 million. That was a choice. I don't want to talk to you. Her eyes said. My mother became quiet. Then she said, "You used to be so close." I looked toward the window. There was a time when that sentence would have destroyed me. Now it only made me tired. We used to be, and that was the truth. The person I missed wasn't the woman who had stolen my identity. I missed the sister I thought I had. There is a difference. A few weeks later, my attorney called me. "Emily, the court has finalized the financial separation." I sat at my desk. "What does that mean? Your name is officially cleared from the loan." I exhaled. For the first time in almost a year, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for another disaster. The bank had confirmed that I had never authorized the loan. The fraudulent documents had been removed from my records. My credit was restored. My house was safe. My business was safe. My future was safe. But something inside me had changed permanently. I no longer trusted my own instincts the way I used to. Every time someone asked me for a personal document, I questioned why. Every time someone needed money, I wondered what the real reason was. And every time someone said, "But we're family," I heard Claire's voice. I had once believed that sentence meant safety. Now I understood that sometimes it was used as a weapon. Claire eventually accepted a plea agreement. She admitted to using my personal information. She admitted to submitting documents that made it appear I had agreed to the loan. She admitted that she knew I would never willingly sign the papers. That last part stayed with me. She knew I would say no. She knew I would never approve the property. She knew I would never risk my entire life on her business. And instead of accepting my answer, she created a fake version of me who had said yes. That was the part I could never forgive. Not because she had wanted money, because she had wanted my consent without giving me the chance to refuse. She wanted my signature, but she didn't want my voice. She wanted my credit, but she didn't want my opinion. She wanted my name, but she didn't want me involved. And that is what Claire had always wanted from me: the benefits of having a sister without the responsibility of treating me like one. After the case ended, I stopped speaking to her completely. No calls, no messages, no visits, nothing. At first the silence felt strange, then it became peaceful. I had spent so many Years waiting for the next emergency, the next request, the next crisis, the next explanation. Now there was nothing, just quiet, and I discovered that quiet can feel like freedom. My daughter noticed the change before anyone else. One evening she came into my office. "You seem different." I looked up from my computer. How she shrugged, calmer. I smiled. "I think I'm finally learning how to say no." She sat down across from me. "Because of Aunt Claire." I nodded. She thought for a moment. "Do you hate her?" The question surprised me. I thought about it. "No." "Then why don't you talk to her?" "Because forgiveness doesn't mean access." Lily looked at me. I continued. "You can forgive someone and still decide they are not safe to have close to you." She nodded slowly. That conversation stayed with me because I realized I had spent my entire life believing forgiveness meant reopening the door, but it doesn't. Sometimes forgiveness is simply putting the key down and walking away. I don't know if Claire ever truly understood what she did to me. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't, maybe she only understood the consequences because she was caught. But I know what happened to me. I stopped seeing myself as the person who had been betrayed. I started seeing myself as the person who survived it. There is a difference between those two identities. One is defined by what someone did to you, the other is defined by what you chose to do. Afterward, I chose to protect myself. I chose to tell the truth. I chose not to lie for someone who had lied using my name, and I chose not to sacrifice my future to protect someone from the consequences of her own choices. That choice saved me, not just financially, emotionally, because before Claire stole my identity, I had already lost parts of myself trying to be the perfect sister. I was always the responsible one, the one who helped, the one who answered, the one who fixed things. And Claire had learned that if she created a big enough emergency, I would come running. But the day the bank called me was the day I stopped running for the first time. I looked at the emergency and asked a question I had never asked before. Is this actually mine to fix? The answer was no. It was Claire's, and she had created it. That realization changed every relationship in my life. I started setting boundaries with everyone, not just Claire. I stopped lending money I couldn't afford to lose. I stopped co-signing. I stopped sharing financial information casually. I stopped allowing guilt to make decisions for me, and strangely, the people who truly loved me didn't get angry. They understood. The people who were only comfortable with the old version of me did. That was how I learned who was really in my life, not by asking who loved me, by watching who respected my boundaries. My parents eventually stopped pressuring me. My mother still spoke to Claire. I never asked her to choose. That was important to me. I didn't want anyone else to be forced into the same position I had been in. I didn't want my parents to choose between their daughters. I simply chose not to participate in the relationship anymore. There is a difference between controlling who someone else loves and choosing who gets access to you. I chose me, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. A few years later, I sold my accounting firm. I had built it from nothing, and after everything that happened, I realized I wanted a different kind of life. I moved to a smaller house near the lake. I spent more time with Lily. I traveled. I read books. I learned how to enjoy quiet mornings without waiting for someone to need something from me. Sometimes I still think about the Arizona resort. I think about the money, the fake documents, the signature, the bank officer's voice when she told me about the loan, and I think about how easily my life could have been destroyed if I had missed that first phone call, if the bank had approved the loan without contacting me, if Claire had been more careful. I might have spent years trying to prove that I wasn't responsible for a debt I never created. That thought still scares me, but it also reminds me why I tell the story, because identity theft. The first time I realized I was truly free, I was standing in my new kitchen with a cup of coffee in my hand. There were no bank letters on the counter, no messages from Claire, no emergency waiting for me, no financial crisis that needed my immediate attention, just sunlight coming through the window, and silence. For years, I had believed silence meant something was wrong. If Claire didn't answer, I assumed there was a problem. If my phone rang late at night, I expected bad news. If someone said they needed to talk, I immediately prepared myself to solve something. But that morning, the silence felt different. It wasn't the silence before a crisis. It was the silence after one, and for the first time, I allowed myself to enjoy it. Sat at the kitchen table and thought about the woman I had been before the bank called me. I had been generous, responsible, loyal, But I had also been afraid that saying no would make people leave, afraid that setting boundaries would make me selfish, afraid that if I stopped helping, I would stop being needed. Claire understood that fear better than anyone. She knew exactly how to use it whenever I hesitated. She reminded me that we were sisters. Whenever I questioned her decisions, she told me I didn't believe in her. Whenever I refused to give her what she wanted, she made me feel guilty, and I kept responding over and over again until the day she took my identity. That was the day guilt finally stopped working, because there is a limit to how much guilt can control a person. For me, that limit was $2 million. After the case ended, Claire sent me one final message. It was short, just 6 words: "You really destroyed our family." I stared at the screen for a long time, then I typed a response. I wrote, "No, Claire. You made a choice." I never sent it. I deleted the message because I realized something. I didn't owe her an explanation anymore. I had spent years explaining myself to her, why I couldn't give her more money, why I didn't support the resort, why I didn't want to risk my house, why I couldn't pretend the loan was legitimate, why I had gone to the police, why I had told the truth. Every explanation gave her another opportunity to argue, another opportunity to manipulate, another opportunity to turn my boundary into a debate. So I stopped explaining. No became a complete sentence, and that was one of the hardest lessons of my life. The first time I said no without explaining myself, I felt guilty. The second time, I felt nervous. The third time, I felt powerful, not because I wanted control over anyone else, because I had finally regained control over myself. I also changed the way I thought about forgiveness. For a long time, people told me I needed to forgive Claire. They said forgiveness would help me heal. Maybe they were right, but forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing happened. It didn't mean trusting her again. It didn't mean giving her access to my life, and it certainly didn't mean forgetting. I forgave Claire for my own peace, not for her comfort. There is a difference. I don't carry anger toward her anymore, but I also don't carry her. That's the part people don't understand. You can let go of anger without picking up responsibility. You can release hatred without reopening the door. You can wish someone well without allowing them back into your life. And sometimes that is the healthiest ending you can have. My daughter eventually asked me if I would ever speak to Claire again. I told her I didn't know. Maybe one day, maybe never, but I didn't want to make promises about a future I couldn't see. What I knew was simple: if Claire ever came back into my life, it would be on completely different terms. No access to my finances, no access to my private documents, no automatic forgiveness. No pretending. Trust would have to be rebuilt from the ground up. And this time I would be watching actions, not words, because words were how Claire had always gotten close. Words about business opportunities, words about desperation, words about family, words about how everything would be different once she succeeded. But the truth was always in her actions, and I had ignored those actions because I wanted to believe the words. I wouldn't make that mistake again. One afternoon, I was cleaning out an old storage box when I found a photograph. Claire and I were teenagers. We were sitting on the hood of our parents' old car. She was laughing. I was pretending to be annoyed. We looked happy for a few seconds. I just stared at the picture, then I felt something unexpected. I missed her, not the woman who had committed fraud, the girl in the photograph, the sister who had once shared my bedroom, the person who had known every secret I had as a child. And that was when I realized healing doesn't mean you stop missing someone. It means you stop allowing the memories of who they were to excuse what they became. Claire had been my sister. She had also stolen my identity. Both things were true. I didn't have to choose one truth and erase the other. She had been important to me, and she had hurt me. She had loved me in some ways, and she had betrayed me in others. Life is rarely as simple as deciding someone is entirely good or entirely bad, but complicated doesn't mean unclear. I knew exactly what she had done, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I put the photograph back in the box. I didn't throw it away. I didn't need to destroy every memory just because the relationship had ended. I simply stopped letting the past make decisions for my future. Years have passed since that phone call. My daughter is now older, my business is gone, my life is quieter, and I am happier than I expected to be. Sometimes I still receive calls from unknown numbers. For a split second, my heart jumps, then I breathe, I answer, and if it's a bank, I verify. Everything if it's a stranger, I give them nothing, and if someone says, but you can. Trust me, I remember that trust is not proven by how much access you give someone. Trust is proven by what they do when you say no. Claire failed that test and I learned the lesson. The most dangerous person in your life is not always the person who hates you sometimes. It's the person who loves what you can provide. Sometimes it's the person who believes your success belongs to them. Sometimes it's the person who says we're family only when they want something, and sometimes the hardest thing you can do is accept that love and danger can exist in the same relationship. I spent years thinking I had to choose between being a good sister and protecting myself. Now I know I was never supposed to choose. A good sister can help, a good sister can love, a good sister can forgive, but a good sister can also say no, and anyone who requires you to destroy yourself to prove your love isn't asking for love, they're asking for control. Claire stole my identity because she believed my life was something she could use. My credit, my name, my money, my reputation, my future. She believed that because we shared blood, she had the right to borrow all of it, but she was wrong. My life belonged to me, and it always had. I just needed the courage to take it back. The bank called me that day because they thought I had borrowed $2 million. They were wrong. I hadn't borrowed the money, I hadn't signed the documents, I hadn't approved the deal, but I had allowed someone access to my life without asking enough questions. And I learned from that today. I keep my identity protected, I keep my finances separate, I keep my boundaries clear, and I no longer feel guilty about any of it, because being kind doesn't mean being careless, being generous doesn't mean being available for exploitation. Being family doesn't mean being responsible for someone else's choices, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what the truth taught you. Claire wanted me to believe that I had destroyed her life, but the truth is, I only stopped allowing her to use mine, and once I did that, I discovered that I still had a life of my own, a life without emergencies, a life without guilt, a life without constantly waiting for the next request, a life where I could help people because I wanted to, not because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. That is the life I have now, and sometimes when I think about that phone call in the grocery store, I remember exactly what I was holding: eggs, coffee, a birthday cake, a normal afternoon, and then one phone call changed everything. I thought the call was going to tell me about a loan. Instead, it told me who my sister really was, and it also told me who I was. I was someone who could survive betrayal, someone who could stand in court and tell the truth, someone who could let a relationship end without destroying myself to save it, someone who could forgive without forgetting, and someone who could finally say, this is my life, my name, my future, my choice, and no one gets to take that from me again. And no one gets to take that from me again. I thought that was the end of the story, but 6 months later, I received a letter from the court. Claire had requested permission to contact me, not through my parents, not through an attorney directly. My first instinct was to throw the letter away. Then I read the reason. She wanted to apologize. I almost laughed. For months, I had waited for those words. By the time they finally came, I wasn't sure I needed them anymore. Still, I agreed to one meeting, not because I wanted to save her, not because I wanted to rebuild our relationship. I agreed because I wanted to hear the truth from her one final time. We met in a small conference room at a law office. Claire walked in alone. She looked different, older, tired. There was no expensive clothing, no confidence, no business plan, no story about the next big opportunity. She sat across from me. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I am sorry. I looked at her. She continued, I know you probably don't believe me. I don't know what I believe anymore. She nodded. I used your identity because I knew you would say no. I already knew that, but hearing her say it still hurt. She told me she had convinced herself the resort would succeed. She had convinced herself that once the money started coming in, she would refinance the loan and remove my name. She had convinced herself that I would never find out, and when the bank called me, she had panicked, so she lied. Then she lied again, and then she tried to make me look responsible for something I had never done. I thought you would save me, she said. I looked at her. I had been saving you for years. She lowered her eyes. I know. That was the first time she had ever said it. Not, you should have helped me, not you ruined my life, not you misunderstood. Just, I know. And somehow that was enough. Not enough to repair the relationship, not enough to erase what she had done, but enough for me to stop waiting For an apology, I told her I forgave her. She looked surprised, then I added, but forgiveness doesn't mean we're going back to the way things were. She nodded. I understand, I hope. You do. We sat in silence for another moment, then Claire stood before she left. She turned around. I really did love you. I believed her, and that was the hardest part because sometimes people can love you and still hurt you sometimes. They can care about you and still choose themselves. Sometimes someone can be your family and still become the person you have to protect yourself from. I told Claire I hoped she built a good life, then she left. I never saw her again. My mother still sends me updates. Sometimes Claire found a job. She rented a small apartment. She started over without my money, without my credit, without my identity, and maybe that was the life she should have built from the beginning, a life that belonged to her, not one built on my name. As for me, I kept going. I rebuilt my credit, strengthened my business, changed every security system, and learned to protect the things I had spent my entire life building. But the biggest thing I rebuilt was myself. For years I thought being a good sister meant always being available, always saying yes, always helping, always forgiving. Now I understand something different. You can love your family without giving them unlimited access to your life. You can forgive someone without trusting them again. You can wish someone well without walking beside them, and you can finally choose yourself without being selfish. My sister stole my identity to get a $2 million loan. The bank called me before she did, and that phone call changed everything. It showed me that the person I trusted most had betrayed me, but it also showed me something else I had spent years believing, that my value came from what I could do for other people, the money I could provide, the problems I could solve, the emergencies I could fix. But when I stopped fixing Claire's problems, I discovered that I was still enough even when I wasn't paying her bills, even when I wasn't saving her business, even when I wasn't carrying her life on my shoulders. I was still enough, and that is what Claire could never take from me. She could use my name, she could copy my signature, she could borrow money with my identity, but she could never own me because my life was never hers to take. It was mine, my name, my future, my choice. And after everything she did, I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't a betrayal of my family. It was the first time I had truly been loyal to myself. And sometimes that is the hardest person in your life to choose. Can care about you and still choose themselves. Sometimes someone can be your family and still become the person you have to protect yourself from. I told Claire I hoped she built a good life. Then she left. I never saw her again. My mother still sends me updates. Sometimes Claire found a job. She rented a small apartment. She started over without my money, without my credit, without my identity, and maybe that was the life she should have built from the beginning, a life that belonged to her, not one built on my name. As for me, I kept going. I rebuilt my credit, strengthened my business, changed every security system, and learned to protect the things I had spent my entire life building. But the biggest thing I rebuilt was myself. For years I thought being a good sister meant always being available, always saying yes, always helping, always forgiving. Now I understand something different. You can love your family without giving them unlimited access to your life. You can forgive someone without trusting them again. You can wish someone well without walking beside them, and you can finally choose yourself without being selfish. My sister stole my identity to get a $2 million loan. The bank called me before she did, and that phone call changed everything. It showed me that the person I trusted most had betrayed me, but it also showed me something else I had spent years believing, that my value came from what I could do for other people, the money I could provide, the problems I could solve, the emergencies I could fix. But when I stopped fixing Claire's problems, I discovered that I was still enough, even when I wasn't paying her bills, even when I wasn't saving her business, even when I wasn't carrying her life on my shoulders. I was still enough, and that is what Claire could never take from me. She could use my name, she could copy my signature, she could borrow money with my identity, but she could never own me because my life was never hers to take. It was mine, my name, my future, my choice. And after everything she did, I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't a betrayal of my family. It was the first time I had truly been loyal to myself. And sometimes that is the hardest person in your life to choose. And even today I still think about that phone call. The bank called me because someone had used my identity to borrow $2 million. But the truth is, the money was never the thing that hurt the most. It was realizing that the person I trusted enough to help was the same person who knew exactly how to betray me. I forgave Claire, but I never gave her access to my life again, and I don't regret that, because family should mean love. It should mean support. It should mean being there when someone needs you, but family should never mean that someone is entitled to your money, your credit, your identity, or your future. So now I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, would you have pressed charges against your own sister, or would you have forgiven her and tried to protect her from the consequences? And be honest. Do you think Claire truly regretted what she did, or did she only regret getting caught? Because personally, I still don't know the answer. All I know is this: my sister stole my identity to get a $2 million loan. The bank called me before she did, and that phone call didn't just expose her crime, it forced me to finally understand something I should have learned years earlier. You can love someone with your whole heart and still need to protect yourself from them, and sometimes the person you have to save is yourself.